Some people will spend their entire lives trying to build this grand, impressive legacy, only for the very last chapter to be, well, kind of like a punchline. Today, we're diving into some of history's most unbelievable endings, where it really seems like fate had a very, very strange sense of humor.
Just think about that for a second. The single defining feature that made you famous, the one thing everybody knew you for, ends up being the direct cause of your death. It sounds like a bad joke, right? But for one man, it was a tragic, and let's be honest, a completely ridiculous reality.
So for our first story, let's head back to the 16th century, to a town called Braunau am Main, right on the border of what we now call Austria and Germany. And this is where we meet a man named Hans Steininger. He wasn't just some guy. He was the town's highly respected leader. And look, Hans was a big deal. He was a serious politician, elected mayor 6 times in a row because the people knew he genuinely cared about them. But all his hard work, all his political achievements were always, and I mean always, overshadowed by one very long physical trait.
And there it is. Hans Steininger was the proud owner of a beard that was over 4.5 feet long. I mean, can you imagine? It was his trademark, his claim to fame. Now, usually he kept it all neatly rolled up and tucked away in a leather pouch, for safety. But one day, he forgot.
So on September 28, 1567, everything went wrong. A fire breaks out in town, and all the chaos and panic, Hans rushes to help, but his magnificent beard is just flowing free. As he's hurrying down a set of stairs, he steps right on his own facial hair, trips, and tumbles all the way down, breaking his neck. And just like that, the beloved mayor was gone, taken out by his greatest asset.
And here's the ultimate ironic twist. The town was so heartbroken that they actually preserved the very thing that killed him. Yep, his famous beard outlived him, and today it's a museum exhibit. It pretty much guarantees that Hans Steininger will forever be remembered not for his politics, but for his fatal facial hair.
All right, next up we're jumping even further back in time, all the way to ancient Greece. It's the 3rd century BC, and we're meeting Chrysippus, a hugely influential philosopher, a man whose entire life was dedicated to logic, reason, and self-control.
You see, Chrysippus was a Stoic. His whole philosophy, his life's work, was about using your brain to control your emotions, not the other way around. He believed you should accept your fate with peace. Now, I'm not so sure he could have reasoned his way through his own ending.
So, picture this. Chrysippus is 73 years old. He's at a feast, probably enjoying some wine. And then he sees something that he just finds absolutely gut-bustingly hilarious. A donkey, just over there, munching away on some figs.
This was it. This was the joke that sealed his fate. Watching the donkey, he turns to his friend and says, "Give the donkey some pure wine to wash down the figs." For him, this was the peak of comedy, the funniest thing he'd ever heard. And yet, the punchline literally took him out. Legend has it that Chrysippus went into such a violent fit of laughter at his own joke that he collapsed and died, right there on the spot. A man of pure logic, completely defeated by an illogical, uncontrollable laugh.
Okay, I know, this sounds like something straight out of a cartoon. It just seems impossible. But it does make you wonder, can you actually die from laughing? Is that even medically possible?
Well, believe it or not, the answer is yes. It is extremely rare, but if you get into a laughing fit that's so intense and uncontrollable, it can put a ton of stress on your heart. It could even trigger cardiac arrest if you have some other underlying condition. Or you could just suffocate, literally laughing so hard you can't get enough oxygen. But we have to be good historians here. The same ancient biographer who told that amazing death by laughter story also threw in a, let's say, less exciting alternative theory. That Chrysippus just died after drinking way too much undiluted wine at the party. But come on, let's be real. The story of the killer joke is just so much better. And for our final story, we've got a guy who didn't just tempt death, he made a whole career out of basically spitting in its face. This is the incredible and incredibly weird case of Bobby Leach, a man who just seemed indestructible. I mean, just look at this resume of recklessness. The guy was a professional high diver for the circus, he parachuted off bridges right over the Niagara River, and then, in 1911, he pulled off his greatest feat. He went over Niagara Falls in a steel barrel and somehow lived to tell the tale. And when I say he survived, I mean barely. He came out of that barrel with a gassed-up forehead, a shattered jaw, and 2 broken kneecaps. He was in the hospital for months recovering. This was a man who took an insane amount of punishment and just kept on going. He really seemed invincible.
So after conquering one of the most powerful waterfalls in the entire world, you'd probably think that only something equally massive and epic could finally take Bobby Leach down, right? But after a lifetime of death-defying stunts, his final showdown with fate was anything but spectacular.
Yep, an orange peel. In 1926, while he was just walking down a street in New Zealand, Bobby Leach slipped on a discarded orange peel. The fall was so bad that it completely snapped his leg. The wound got infected with gangrene, they had to amputate his leg, and he died from complications soon after. The man who survived Niagara Falls was defeated by a piece of fruit.
So what do we even make of all this? We've got a politician, a philosopher, and a daredevil. All of them lived these incredible, larger-than-life lives, only to have them end in the most mundane, almost comical ways imaginable.
It really does put things in perspective, doesn't it? A mayor's identity costs him his life, a philosopher's logic gets undone by a moment of pure silliness, and a daredevil who conquered nature gets taken out by simple, everyday carelessness. It's just a wild reminder that sometimes the very things that define us can also be our undoing. Which kind of leaves us with this one last question. We spend all this time carefully trying to build a legacy, trying to control our own story. But maybe, just maybe, the real story is that we have no control at all. Does an absurd ending erase a life of significance? Or, in some strange way, does it just make these people even more human and even more memorable?